I've probably spent the whole of the pandemic living in an environment where I feel in fear of expressing my own personal views, fear about basically losing my job, I suppose.
Well, and I don't want you to be afraid of sharing those views with the nation right now. Tell me, Steve, have you, if you're willing to answer the question, have you been vaccinated?
No, I haven't.
Okay. And could it become a condition of your employment if this law goes through? Do you know?
That's what's been proposed by my employers.
Right.
We have regular emails suggesting or advising us where we can go and get vaccinated. I mean, we could have been vaccinated at the very, very beginning of when vaccinations were available, and I declined.
Which is your right. Which is your right.
Yeah, I'm very much pro-freedom and pro-choice, and at the moment I'm exercising that right. I'm very fortunate I've got a good line manager who is able to talk to me off the record. But as far as the overall sort of corporate message is, they are very much pushing people to get vaccinated. I believe, and this hasn't been officially circulated, but I believe the care home industry has been set targets by the government to get a certain percentage of their employees vaccinated.
Yeah.
So I have a concern that part of this is a tick box exercise for the industry as a whole to have to go through to be able to satisfy government. Whether there are any strings attached to that or not, I don't know. Maybe Alison can enlighten us on that. At the moment, I haven't been pressurised, as in given an ultimatum. As I said, I believe that this isn't law yet. What I'm not sure of is what my employer is going to do regardless of what the government say.
Yes.
But certainly they are putting people under a degree of pressure to get vaccinated.
Yes, and could there be forced vaccination by the back door? You know, could you be frozen out professionally? Could life be made harder for you? And the question, Steve, what will you do if the law changes?
Well, I do have concerns. I think they are looking to change job profiles and contracts so that any new employees, it may become part of their new terms of employment for people joining the organisation. For existing people, if it becomes a mandatory condition of employment, then that's going to give me a major dilemma. I enjoy what I do. I don't want to leave. But at the moment, I have no intention of being vaccinated. I know some people out there may well say, well, you're in the wrong industry then. Leave, go and do something else. I'm not sure I want to live in that sort of country where we're forcing people to do that, though.
Steve, how do you feel, though, about the idea that you might have COVID, you might be asymptomatic? I mean, we can debate asymptomatic spread, of course, which I've got, some suspicions about. But let's just imagine you've got COVID and you come into contact with one of the residents and they get COVID and then, suffer as a result. I mean, how do you feel about that? Have you reflected on the ethics of it? Let's imagine somebody was unable to be vaccinated because of health complications. Many will listen and just think, well, you work in a care home, you're among, at times very elderly and vulnerable people. What's the problem with getting the jab?
Yeah, sure. I have done a lot of research. I've listened to talk radio. I generally don't listen to mainstream media, including the BBC, very much these days. I've done a lot of research independently. I've spent hours trying to look at alternative views. And I've made my own choices. We could spend hours and hours, if not days.
Well, and do you know what, Steve? And do you know something? I'm not going to ask you why you don't want the vaccine, because that is your sovereign right. Just as I find it irritating when people get asked in a supermarket why they're exempt. It's against the law. You can't ask someone why you're exempt. So I defend your right not to have the vaccine. But do you worry about giving it to a care home resident?
You know what? The thing is, for the last 14 months, anybody working in a care environment, I was fortunate to work in one where there was an abundance of PPE. Now, the rules have changed as the pandemic has gone on. Sometimes it's been masks, sometimes it's been masks and aprons and gloves, sometimes we get into scrubs. It's changed as the whole thing has changed. So all of us, whether I'm in more of an admin role or whether I'm an actual carer day to day with vulnerable and old people, for the last 14 months, the PPE has been there for us. If it was good enough throughout the whole of the pandemic for us to put ourselves at risk, in inverted commas, why isn't it good enough now?
Perfectly reasonable question. Ultimately, Steve, do you think this is going to happen? Do you think the law will change?
I wish I could call that. I really do. I have so little faith in what our government is doing to us and has done to us throughout the whole lockdown process, the whole pandemic, that I am concerned that it might happen. I hope it doesn't. I really hope it doesn't.
And Steve, if it does, then you might have to consider sacrificing your career, which is it's a huge thing to have to do, isn't it?
Yeah, unless some sort of role can be found whereby I am not coming into contact with residents in the same way that perhaps I have been in the past.
Steve, thank you for calling. I appreciate your candor.